Are you sound people happy? Okay. Well, why don't we start, presumably slowly.
The waiting game was finally over. After packing our lives up in a whirlwind in September, we fled for the sanctuary of the Southern Hemisphere to wait out Montreal's notoriously brutal winters. While much of Canada froze, we basked in the heat of the thinning ozone of the South Pacific. But as Montreal thawed out, so too did the problems we'd run away from. And now it was time to go home. The moment we'd been waiting for almost a year was here. Spring in La Belle Provence. The rebirth and optimism of April was here. Spring had sprung. And it wasn't exactly like I expected it to be. But despite the still near zero temperatures, there was one orange flower blooming all over the city. Needless to say, it was becoming clear that my transition into living in a French-speaking urban center would be about as smooth as a casual drive down a Montreal street. After close to 60 job applications over the span of 6 months and 0 leads, I finally got a lead just weeks before I left Australia. After an interview that took place at 2 a.m. local time, I was passed through to the final round of the hiring process, which was required to happen in person. The latest they could do was March 31st, about 10 days earlier than the date of my flight back home. When I went about trying to change my flight home, I quickly found out that it no longer existed. As it turns out, just a week after I arrived in Australia, my flight was cancelled. The cancellation email made it into an obscure, never-checked folder of my email inbox. And so I scrambled to book a one-way flight home back to Vancouver for over double what my original round-trip flight was. I flew into Vancouver, and less than 24 hours after my 15-hour flight, I was touching down in Montreal. 2 days later, I successfully completed the final stage of the hiring process. I also managed to get all of our stuff out of storage and into the 2-bedroom apartment we had closed on, sight unseen from Australia. I then flew back to Vancouver to spend Easter with my family, which was the original plan all along. During the 7 days I was back in Vancouver, there was an ice storm that wreaked havoc on the city and burned down a townhouse a block over from me. A mere few days later, the temperature was in the high 20s. In the 7 days I was gone, winter had ended, spring had come, and we are now in summer. Welcome to Montreal. Or, should I say, bienvenue. And unlike my arrival, the arrival of another Anglophone blow-in, the real arrival of spring was welcomed with open arms. My winter gear was put away, my shorts were hiked, my mid-high socks elastics were tight, my shoes were tied for function not style, and precautionary measures were taken for my new pedestrian lifestyle. We embraced urban hipsterism by shopping at eco-friendly bulk food stores and by supporting local independent produce stores. Our car was gone, and so was the money we'd gotten from it, and I was reintroducing myself to commuting exclusively by bus and train.
Comme un lion dans ma cage, blotti dans mes draps, enragé, prêt à dévorer. Dans les couloirs de la vie, on se perçoit. Assieds-toi, on ne se reconnaît pas. Je meurs, tu ne vois pas. Je meurs, tu ne vois pas.
In many ways, the move to Montreal was more of a culture shock than the move to Australia.
Je te glisse entre les doigts. Je te glisse entre les doigts.
I didn't need to worry about visas, bank accounts, or time differences. But I did need to worry about learning French, which was even harder to understand than Australian. Political tensions in Montreal and Quebec were always high. They had some draconian laws. Currently, the Quebec government was fighting to take away the right for people to access medical care in English.
Comme un lion dans ma cage, blotti dans mes draps, enragé, prêt à dévorer.
They also had some draconian customs, like refusing to celebrate Canada Day and instead having the entire province move on July 1st, which of course created no logistical issues at all. This move was not a memory-making, short-term sojourn to an exotic foreign land. This was an attempt at permanence, at settling down roots in an exotic foreign land. There were many unknowns. The job I had gotten provided long-term stability, but short-term uncertainty. As a new employee, my schedule and location constantly changed, and hours were not guaranteed. Day after day after day, I was barraged with things that I could not understand and struggled to interpret. And yet, this place felt like home.